know, probably mute your.
I'm gonna mute it after. I'm gonna mute it right after this. Cool. And then please remind me to mute mine in a minute. Okay. I think we're set up because I can hear myself, so I know we're set up. All right. TV. Yeah, it's because you're still connected. That's cool. No worries. So thanks everybody for coming out. We'll go ahead and get started. If you're new to the group, we do this every 2 weeks here, usually in this room, depending on how many people RSVP. So when you get the little notice, which I know I sent it out late because I have a lot going on, please RSVP as soon as possible so we know to get the appropriate size, to get the appropriate amount of food. Also, I always forget this, but remember thank PAC for the pizza, but they're the ones providing the pizza for us so that we can do this. So I don't have to pay for it, which is great. Today we're going to be talking, Leighton's going to be giving a talk on pair programming. Oh, great. I didn't even realize it was there. Yes, it is there. So he's going to be doing that one today. Yeah, I think, Leighton, you added it? Nope. Wow. Okay, I don't remember even doing that. Oh, it says open by me too. Okay.
So if you're in a fugue state, at least you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I was just about to say sorry for not having it in here because I was busy and I didn't do it. But apparently I did it. I just didn't remember I did it.
1 a.m. program.
Yeah. So Leighton's gonna be doing some things on pair programming. That's gonna be pretty awesome. We don't really have anything on the schedule beyond the day. There's one person I met at a conference on Friday that may come in and present next time, but that's not a given. We still have to work out the logistics on that. As I mentioned before, my role is slightly changing, which means I'm getting more added to my job jar, and I'm really starting to fall behind on managing and keeping up with the dev group. And I don't want it to not happen because I'm too busy. So afterwards, because I think Leighton's session is probably about 30 minutes or so, 35 minutes, 40 minutes, maybe with Q&A. Yeah. Afterwards, if you want to stick around and you're willing to, there's a complete document for exactly all the steps of running the group. You don't have to take the whole thing. You can just pick one of them, and then we can kind of crowdsource the running of the group. So it'll be, community run, community based, that sort of thing. I think that's it. So with that, I'll give it over to Leighton. I think yeah.
And I unmute.
Yes, and let me mute.
Okay. So hi everybody. My name is Leighton Meredith, and I'm going to do a presentation on pair programming. So we're going to go through. So this is pretty much what I have. We're going to be talking about the overview, pairing techniques. If we have enough time, we might get into a demo, and we're going to talk about pairing considerations. So for the overview, we're going to talk about the intro, benefits, when to pair, when not to pair, and times that we actually are pairing. So for what is pair programming? So it's pretty much 2 or more devs working together in parallel just to write code. So you have different types of pair programming that we're going to talk about a little bit later. Ping pong, Pomodoro, and mob programming. Some people think this is the developers, they're not going as fast, but the quality of the code is it's a better quality code. The only thing that's not going as fast is just the typing. So you have 2 things. You have the driver, which is the one that's operating the keyboard. He is pretty much focused on the output of the code that is being written at the time, making sure that the formatting is right, naming and stuff like that. And then you have the navigator. The navigator, that person, he's reviewing the code from a broader perspective, sometimes considering other things that may be affected by the code that's being written. So they look at it from a wider scope. So the discussion is not just the navigator navigating. It's, it's the driver driving. It's an actual discussion A driver can think about things on a broader scope, and the navigator can vice versa. Another good thing for I didn't know that I left that there, but it was supposed to be. It's in my notes. It's in my notes. I had a couple beers before, so while doing my research, I realized that the driver is sometimes not comfortable if you're pointing at their screen. If you have 4 set of hands on one keyboard, you know, it's not a comfortable environment to be in. So one of the most important things for us to do is make sure that everybody is in a comfortable state, and being in somebody's personal space. Let's try not to be pointing and shit. Okay. Okay. So the benefits of peer programming. So you have the knowledge sharing and transfer. So pretty much not one person has the keys to the bus. Let's say, for example. So not one person. Let's say we're limiting the bus factor. Does everyone know what the bus factor is? Okay, so the bus factor is if Leighton gets hit by okay, let's not say Leighton. Is there a Kevin in here? I don't want to kill off anybody, but if somebody is the only person that knows how the email server works, and that one person decides to go on vacation, that one person decides to be sick that day, or is getting a new machine and the configurations are not working properly, like what I'm going through now. It's the knowledge sharing that helps. It takes 3 to 4 or 5 people before we actually start getting really concerned about, okay, nobody knows how the email server works, right? It increases productivity. The slow code is what management and customers would argue, but the quality of the code is greatly improved. While I was doing the research on this, I realized that, well, there was something that I found that 100% of the time, there was some random code inspections, and the coders that was working by themselves versus coders that actually paired and produced code, 100% of the time, the quality was better. The morale is improved. So I, for one, I'm the only developer in my team. So having the feeling of being in a silo, and if you get stuck or something happens where you don't know where to turn, you can't bounce ideas off of another developer to get feedback.
You just Google.
Well, yeah, I do. That is actually one of my resources at the end. You have a constant code reviewer. So for some of us, we are doing code review, and there are times when you're actually, you write the code, everything looks fine, you put it in to get reviewed, but then you go on to another task. So when the reviewer is reviewing this code, now you have to stop focusing on task B and go back into the mode of task A to figure out what this question is. If you guys are coding basically side by side, if the navigator has a question for the driver is already in that state of mind where they can tell you their thought process, and it increases readability. So it limits bad coding practice, because if you naming variables, coding styles, those are the things that usually, let's say the way how Andre types his bad spelling, like I would be able to catch that before it actually goes in for a pull request or for review. Okay, when to peer. So there are certain times when it's a good idea for us to peer, and complex code. So if it's more than one person that understands the complexity, like we talked about with the bus factor, there are more bugs that are prone in complex code. It's a code base where it's been there for years and nobody touches it except everybody touches it. And it ends up bugs get implemented in here. And there is a need for critical maintenance. Volatile sections, this has the bug potential when you're adding this is the section where you're adding a new rule, you're modifying existing rules. This is a place of frequent changes. So if you're making a lot of different changes, the higher the change, well, the higher the amount of change is the more likely the amount of chances for us to introduce a new bug. Critical systems, this is where pair programming is going to limit adding complex code. And core libraries, this is where you need it for maintainability. And then you actually have more than one opinion with regards to network configuration. So when not to pair. Okay, so when not to pair, I thought this was another one of my things. Okay, so when not to pair, trivial task. These are little tasks that the navigator really does not need to be there. You can always create a new class by yourself. You don't need to do that. I'm talking in C# terms. I'm not sure if there's a lot of, okay. So creating just normal, simple task. You don't necessarily need a navigator for that. Spiking code. This is code that you're throwing in to say, just for simple test. You don't necessarily need one for that. And pretty much the second bullet point that talks about coding that's not going to be in production. That is just you wasting your time. Well, not your time because you're trying to step through a process, but you don't need a navigator for this process. And when you're sick. So we would want to have the users not hurl whatever disease or cooties you have over to your fellow developer. That is another, we would call that a bus factor, right? Sick is another euphemism for bus. Okay, so times that you actually are already pairing. Some people here do pair, really. And then there are others that they don't pair. You think you don't pair, but you actually are for debugging together. So let's say there's an issue that you would like to debug. You call your developer over, you have them take a look at it. That's two brains coming together. Naming discussions. Is it there? Okay. Naming discussions. They said the two hardest things are creating instances and naming variables when you're writing code. So naming it helps to understand what your thought process was. It helps the reviewer to understand where you're going with the code. And if your naming conventions are bad, then that might, for the future you and the future developers that would be working on the code, it would be helpful to have someone at the time when you're naming the variable to help out. Whiteboard design, when you're doing discussions on how to build an application on your whiteboard, you guys are actually pairing. And in the code review process, it's just another part of programming, and it's the last step before it ships. And you have multiple eyes on the potential end product, which coincide with actual pair programming. Okay. Oh, well, this one's supposed to be there, but others who pair, they're actually, so there's pilots. So you have the driver and you have the co-pilot, which is the navigator. They have to coordinate on the same task, which is getting from point A to point B. And if a pilot, you're going to be on a long flight, which is another thing we're going to talk about. Not the flight, but if you're going to be if point A to point B is going to be a long process, you want to make sure that you have good company. So making sure that the person is in a comfortable environment. For snipers, you have a spotter, and then, well, you actually have the person that's looking down the narrow scope, right? And then you have another person that's the spotter, right? That's the person that's looking on a broader scope. And then you have a surgeon, where you have, when I was listening to this, so they have okay, so surgeons, there's a thing where they say scalpel, keyboard, mouse. So yeah, so if you don't have one surgeon that's doing, when, like if you're getting surgery, I don't think you would just want one surgeon going in and dealing with, what they need to deal with. You actually have the nurse monitoring, you have multiple surgeons on hand. Okay, so we're going to talk about the pairing techniques now. So for pairing techniques, we have a couple different that we're going to talk about. 4, which is the ping pong pairing, Pomodoro pairing, switching the roles and rotating team members, and mob programming. Okay. So ping pong pairing. Ping pong pairing is pretty much it's not a new thing, but ping pong pairing is a pairing style where the user actually, well, there are two. Let's start off with two developers. One would start off with writing a failing test, and then they would switch, and then the other team member would go in, write the code so the test pass, and then they would write another failing test, and then they would switch, and then the other person would come in and pass that test, and then so on and so forth. So what this does, it encourages test-driven design, which is the way that everybody's going now. Everyone has a feeling of collective code ownership. It's not just one person just writing the code the whole time, and you're sitting back being a navigator. There's consistent switching. It's a way to. Sometimes there are coders who like to hog the keyboard. Writing it this way, it's a good way that you can actually pass the test that was implemented, and then you switch and then have that other person, and you're still being a part of it, because even though you wrote the failing test, you are now switching off and you're being the navigator. So it helps with shared decision making. So the frequent switching, that gives you time for both testing and for to think about testing and to think about implementation. And like I said before, the test-driven development, it forces you to write tests because that's actually a part of the process. Pomodoro pairing. So Pomodoro pairing, is anybody familiar with the Pomodoro technique? Okay, so the Pomodoro technique is pretty much you're doing one task for 25 minutes and then you rest for 5 minutes. Yeah, so you do one task for 25 minutes and then you rest off for 5 minutes, go on to another task for 25 minutes, and you switch it off. So this basically is saying that you would be switching for a 25-minute interval. So for the keyboard hoggers, you can still do your coding for 25 minutes, but then when your time is up, you're going to have to switch, and then the next partner gets in on the action. This encourages for changing for the partners. Changing with the Pomodoro technique, we're going to talk about that a little bit later in switching roles. But changing the pairing partner is also beneficial for Pomodoro pairing. Go ahead.
It's also good too, like you mentioned, time management technique. You end up getting a lot more done because you get used to those slices and you fit things into those slices, and so you're chipping away at things a lot quicker over time.
So they do have their pros and cons, because for the ping pong pairing, you're not. Some developers they warm up to writing code. You start off a little bit slower, and then you start getting into the zone, and then you go a little bit faster. With the ping pong pairing, that's probably geared more towards experienced developers, where they just jump on, they do their thing, and then they jump off. But with the Pomodoro technique, you get your time to work your way into the zone, and then you can switch off whenever you get tired. So for the pairing techniques, switching roles. So switching roles or partners is one. In the research that I was doing, there was an exercise where there were 8 developers. So over the weekend, they pair in that organization. They paired every couple of hours. They switch pairs. So over the weekend, one developer A and B, developer A found out that they could try something, got into work, did it with A and B. It wasn't anything groundbreaking. It was nothing groundbreaking, but they had a feeling of they actually accomplished something, right? Because it was a bug that was there over the weekend, and they actually ended up switching. So what happened was A and B switched off to C. So A went to C, and B went to D, and that was infectious, because now A is going to be talking about how they resolved the bug over the weekend, and C and D is going to be infected with that feeling of accomplishment, basically.
And a knowledge transfer.
And it was a knowledge transfer. I don't have that. Oh yeah. So then we have the Pomodoro timer rotation. That was one of the things that you could be using for the one way that we can switch roles. Another way is switching based on task. So if you can work on task A and then you can switch and work on task B. That ensures that you're not necessarily always focusing your time on one thing, and you're having that knowledge sharing go across scopes. Rotating. Oh, I just talked about the rotating members. So the plural site is where I actually saw that example, and it encourages richer knowledge sharing and it reduces bugs in the overall system. Okay, so mob programming. Mob programming is you have a navigator and you have one or a couple, let's say one driver, but you have multiple navigators. So in this case, it would be one person writing the code, and then we would have a mob of developers actually navigating. So it was funny because they talked about actually being for like NASA's mission control, where you would have a couple, like a big screen in front, and then you would have a couple navigators on their individual machines if they want to do research, if they want to look up Google, anything what they're doing. But the main focus was on the big screen. So down in my building, they have mission control, and it was interesting to me. So in this case, the driver gets to rotate similar to the pair programming or the Pomodoro. And we're making team decisions, so it's not just the individual-based decisions. And the ideas are being flowed through multiple hands as opposed to just 2 or 3 navigators that we would normally have on the Pomodoro or the pairing technique. Randori mob programming, that's a type of programming, mob programming that I ran into, where you have 2 navigators and drivers, and then everybody else was like observing and advising.
One of the things I liked about that too as well is when you have the whole team making decisions, you don't revisit things over and over. Where you made a design decision and then later on you got open to the wider team and like, oh no, don't do it that way. Here's another experience. And so you end up redoing that work. But when you're doing it there and everyone's there and you have maybe one person's focused on security while another person's focused on usability and another person's focused on that, but they're all focused on the actual task at hand. So you end up getting all those things baked in at the beginning and everyone bought into it. So you don't have to go and revisit it. So when you do the code review, it's kind of like you don't really need a code review because you've already seen it.
It's the whiteboard. It's really the whiteboard.
Yeah, but hands on keyboard actually writing code, but like everyone around the whiteboard and deciding things, but having different navigators for different purposes.
Yeah,
and then you switch
last
the roles.
point, I think, is the key bit.
Yeah.
Like I'll be thinking about usability, somebody else will be thinking about good code structure. And,
Yeah.
and somebody else might be thinking about how does all our code fit together and talk to each other.
Yeah, when I first heard it, I'm like, this is stupid. And when I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Didn't imagine what it is.
Yeah.
Just a quick comment there.
Yeah.
There is a review technique called perspective-based review. So that's exactly the same idea, but this is like perspective-based programming, not review.
Right.
Yeah, you catch it earlier versus later. Yeah.
And you put on, different people put on different hats, and they look from different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder that with pair programming, like how much balance is there? Like if you're thinking of all these perspectives at once, that's got advantages. Would it have a disadvantage? Is like it's hard to focus on one thing at a time sometimes, or
Well, the whole team is working on so there are in a couple of slides down, I talk about the pros and cons, but I think the pros outweigh the cons because of the quality of code that you're actually producing. So even though there is a decline in time, the decline that's in time is not significant. It's not significant enough to be.
let's see how much time I'm thinking about like, do you miss something because the usability is going off on your code? You know, it's
I don't
distraction.
Yeah, just distraction.
Oh, okay.
You address that in there? Because I don't want to jump on
Go
it.
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, you already got it. So
it's fine.
There's some rules that they place around it. You know, how you interact and what you say, what you do. So that you don't have the one dominant person just taking over.
We thought of that one, but
Like, there's some rules around it that governs. You know, so that you have, especially in the mob programming model, where you can have multiple people, multiple opinions, and that sort of thing. That you don't you don't harp on one thing over and over forever. Like if the whole team, if the rest of the team says we're moving on, and that one person's like, no, but you that's a semicolon, and I need a semicolon. We're moving on, and you have to accept that. You know what I mean? So it doesn't doesn't have to be satisfied. You just have to, as a team, agree. Like we all agree.
Yeah.
And now we're moving on.
Yeah, you can't always satisfy everybody all the time.
Yeah.
It's going to be a team decision, you know, and you have to, whatever decision is being made, we have to try to make sure that it's, you know, respectful. You know, you don't want to have that person not want to be a part of the programming process when we're going forward. So that's good. Okay, so I'll save this for last, but the demo was supposed to, well, I don't know, should we? Okay, I'll save this for last. I'll save this for last. So basically the demo is going to be on FizzBuzz. It was going to be a mob style programming. Everybody familiar with FizzBuzz? Okay. So for those who are not familiar, it's a numbers game where you count up to, I think I have it set up for 100, where you count, but you replace certain numbers with the words fizz and or buzz, adhering to certain rules, and below are the rules. The numbers that are divisible by 3, you've got to replace those with fizz, and the numbers that are divisible by 5, you replace those with buzz. The numbers that are divisible by 3 and 5, you replace those with fizz buzz. So we can do that later. Oh yeah, that's going to be even better.
Yeah.
Okay, so pairing considerations. We're going to talk about the pros and cons. We're going to talk about the team considerations, room considerations, source control, and remote pairing. So pros and cons. So the benefits of it's not lined up. I'm very bad at PowerPoint presentations, but the benefits, like we talked about earlier, so there are fewer defects. The design is simpler. We have faster problem solving because there are more minds on the issue. The learning is now distributed across the team. There's better communication, and coding is more enjoyable. Once you buy into the pairing ideology, the pairing idea, then it's going to be more enjoyable. For the soft skills, you're going to have to deal with giving compliments, you know, being respectful, working flexible, and good communications. And it's actually going to help you to be a strong programmer or stronger. So the problems would be the high cost efficiency, the scheduling conflicts, personality clash, the disagreement resolutions, the experienced developer is going to get somewhat slowed down by a non-experienced developer, and the differences in style. There are actually times when developers, they would argue, I don't want to say argue, they would have discussions over style preferences, and that sometimes get in the way. If it's a small group, then it's gonna take away from the time. But if it's on a bigger scale, let's say for the mob programming, the chances of us catching that rabbit hole that we're going down and pulling us out of it so we can move in the direction that we need to go to is higher. So as you can see, I think the benefits outweigh the problems. Well, the benefits and the soft skills outweigh the problems that we have, that we would run into.
How long have you been doing it?
Pair programming?
Yeah.
Andre, I don't know how long we've been doing that. We've been doing it since I've gotten here, probably.
A little after. 2 years. It's changed over time.
Yeah,
we just found a new tool.
Yeah.
I would like to hear about some.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any statistics, like before and after?
Not very organized.
Yeah. we're still trying to find our way.
Produced any code since then?
Oh, yeah.
And it compiles.
Yes, but does it run?
It runs most of the time.
Especially consideration that you two are constant pair as opposed to rotating pair. Because one of the big issues that I don't know if you addressed this somewhere is when you go to pair with someone new and you even touch their mouse and its scroll is opposite.
Right.
All of a sudden you're like, oh man.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
do you guys have anywhere on that?
So there's a tool that I think is going to be in your demo.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that we found.
Yeah. So we found this yesterday. We just started working on it and we were very excited. But there are issues with, well, let me see. So we talked about the pros and cons. Further down the slide, we're going to talk about a couple more things, like you said, with the configurations and all that good stuff.
Another question just about cons. You guys are both pretty outgoing dudes, just like socially.
Mhm.
I'm wondering for the folks who are quieter, like, does this become overwhelming over a while, or you guys like that without any routine?
I have an opinion, but I always have an opinion. So
Okay. Well, I can't show. So it takes a while for us to warm up to being an actual, pairing together. Developers are very introverted. So here interestingly enough, the team pairing considerations. So the excuses that we have, one of them that I have here that's not on the slide says, I'm not social. It says it will slow me down. I can't think when somebody else is there, and I want to listen to my music and code. Those are things that I think us as developers will have to make the step. Like we have to make that first step. You know what I mean? To get into wanting to make ourselves better. Andre always talks about doing code, like writing code, like doing research, like getting to be always trying to be better, because of the fact that even though we have a job here at NASA, things can change, and you need to make sure that you keep abreast with what's going on. So as developers, some of the onus is on us. Like, we have to want to make ourselves better. And I think that getting a different opinion, whether it be good or bad, from another developer, it has helped me to be a better developer. I don't want to say better. It has helped me to not be as bad as I was before. So I think that it's a personal jump that we have to make. So
too, also, you don't have to. I think someone gave me a good definition of introverted versus extrovert, or whatever. And it's like where you get your energy from. Because I'm introverted by nature, but I can still speak in front of a crowd. I just can't do it all day long. You know what I mean?
It's just exhausting.
It'll get exhausting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't pair all day long.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
Like, we have session times that we set up to pair, and if something comes up, we'll jump on and we'll pair. Or if it's a really complicated scenario, like you said, then we'll pair. But we don't pair all day.
Yeah,
all day
you
long.
feel like you're gonna have to strike a balance there. Or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You and the pair and your team, and however you want to organize it, you can decide. Some shops, like the Pluralsight, is a 24/7 pairing shop. You can't do anything unless you're pairing.
I just see a lot of
developers
quitting.
It depends on what works for you. Like, if you have someone that's like, we want to pair all the time, have at it. You know what I mean? Some people, I think you just want to pair it at least some, because some things don't get codified in documentation. They're kind of like, oh yeah, I know about that thing. And now you work with them, and now you know about that thing. And you share that with the next person, now they know about that thing. So it's that what is that culture thing? I can't remember what the term is for it, but that hidden culture everyone knows, but it's not really written down anywhere because they've all kind of seen it or done it. Those things get transferred into pair programming. A bunch of other things I think Leighton's already touched on and will touch on as well. But I just wanted to say, you don't have to do it all the time. And even the most introverted coder likes to talk about their code. They just don't like talking about it in front of everyone. You know what I mean? You still want to be like, hey, your curly brace should not be there. It should be here. Those sorts of things.
but yeah.
So, later, question, maybe you will address this later. From a management perspective, I heard so many times, how do you justify paying for 2 fees instead of 1? How can you convince them?
You go ahead.
Below the abstraction level, right? The requirement was to do the thing within a certain time frame, right? How you get that done? It's like I use this example all the time. You're the homeowner, and you're asking the electrician to wire up your house, and they're telling you to do something that does not make sense. Like,
You're paying me to wire the house in a way that should make sense. You know what I mean? But if you're asking me to put the electrical outlet below the faucet, that doesn't make sense. Like, I think it's one of those things where sometimes the abstraction levels are messed up, where they're saying, and we talked to, what we end up doing is talking to the customer, say, here's what you're getting out of the fact that we pair sometimes. Like, you're getting code review, you're getting higher quality code. It's all in how you go and present it. If you say, hey, you're getting the benefits of more FTEs than you actually have on staff, because every so often there are multiple eyes on it, that sort of thing.
Do you have any numbers to back that up? I mean, I totally with you,
Yeah.
but I deal with management and they say, show me the numbers.
So the only way you can show the numbers is if you try it,
Yeah.
right? So you can say, here, can we try this for a quarter, or can we try this for a month? And let's compare. First, let's measure what we did before, right? So you can have a baseline. And then let's compare that with what we do later. I know for us, all our code gets code reviewed before it goes into master. So the things that we either find in pairing early in the session, we're gonna either not find in code review because we don't have the time to actually do it, or we're gonna find code review and then redo that work. So no matter what you do, unless you're just saying this person writes code and they put it directly into production without any other eyes on it, and then you're just gonna pay for it later. So it's pay me now, pay me later.
So this is part of test-driven development. Some of these metrics come from code coverage, test reports.
Good point.
That could be your baseline, right?
Yeah.
But you should have the
Coverage
numbers.
now, that's the percent.
You don't have to do TDD with pairing. Like, so we don't do TDD when we're pairing.
Yeah.
For the most part, it's good and it's a nice technique.
She's just asking for metrics.
Yeah. For metrics, you can do it. If you're already doing TDD, or if you're already doing testing, then you can do that. But I don't want you to go in with a false argument, because then they can just say, well, you just write the test, right?
Yeah.
You don't need a pair to write the test. Just make sure of the argument before you go in. I think focusing on some of the things that you can only do by pairing. You know what I mean? Like catching those bugs, or getting that consensus early. You can't get consensus if you're waiting to the end to get consensus. You know what I mean? Or you can, but it's going to cost you more.
One of the things that I can say from experience, for me, when we were doing extreme programming back in the 2000s, it wasn't the bus, it was the airplane. So we'd go off to Java 1, and we weren't all allowed to fly on the same plane. It's the coverage. You get to a certain size, and one person knows the front end, another person knows the database, and another person knows the server. With pair programming, actually, we ended up dropping pair programming, went for the board.
Mom.
No, not the mom,
Whiteboard.
the whiteboard
Okay.
development, because we ended up doing, I was talking to a developer last night, almost like Venn diagrams. We built the front end, we built the database, we built the server, and then we all knew what exactly was in each of those components. And so if someone did get hit by a bus or fall out of a plane, there was the coverage.
The backup, yeah.
So that's the big argument, depending on how big of a team you have.
That bus vector.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, go ahead, because I want itching to get to this.
Okay. So warning signs for developers for the team when they seem like they're not buying into pair programming, they look disengaged. They have there's like a watch the master type of attitude where they just sit back and just watch the developer code. And there's silence for more than a short period. So then there's the other bullet point that there's nothing wrong with silence, but it should only be for a short period. Always try and think out loud so the other developer or developers that's in the room knows what you're thinking about. But if the developer asks for silence, there's nothing wrong with giving them a time to think. There are times when I'm writing code or when we're pairing, and Andre and myself, we're thinking out loud, we're talking out loud, but then there are times when we kind of go into our little zone and stop talking for a second because we need to work out the kinks before we actually spit out what we really want to say. And I have a lot of slides. Okay. Room considerations. So pairing in a room, there are some things that we can consider. So U-shaped desk, L-shaped desk in the cubicle. It's not easy for us to have two developers working in. It's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. For an open desk, so like a desk with no enclosed space, you can just have the chair slide under. A standing or an adjustable desk and a walking desk. I didn't even know that was a thing. But those are items that you can use to make the environment a little bit more comfortable. For room considerations, you can use an open area, and almost every developer likes whiteboards. There are some challenges though with the room thing where we would be in different time zone, you would be in a different room or a different cubicle. And I talk about, well, further down in the slide, I'm going to talk about the way how we can overcome those challenges in the room. So for workstation, make sure that we have if both are coding, we need to have at least 2 sets of keyboard and a mouse. Like I said, we shouldn't have four hands on one keyboard. I was looking into the monitor situation, and it's pretty much, if you have an extended monitor, so let's say you have 3 monitors and they're all in extended view, you have more space where you can see the code. But then if a developer is on the left, it's going to be hard for him to see the code that's actually on the right. But with a duplicate screen, you have the coders, the one on the right can see what's actually happening. The one on the left actually sees what's happening. So there are drawbacks to either one. So yeah, so for pairing consideration, for source control, we make sure, we try to get source control in so you can see who's working on what. If you have a big team, GitHub and Andre, myself, and Mike, we use TFS. So we have the @mention where you can actually type somebody's, you could say, okay, @Mike did this thing or whatsoever. And then you have you can code per pair. So let's say it's based on if a smaller group, you can have a pair. So it would be, if you have 2 developers, you can only have 1 pair. If you have 3 developers, you can have 3 different pairs. And the higher it goes, the higher the increments. You can do it per station. So you could have this station is working on one task. Andre's station is working on another task. And then you could do tracking while coding. This is low tech, which is where you talked about the whiteboard and the magnet. Trello, I'm not too familiar with Trello, but they say that it's another item that you can use to track while coding, and GitHub and TFS, where you can use the @mention. Okay, so remote pairing. So this is where in the room consideration where we could be in different time zones. Remote pairing, you can use the items that are at the top. So showmypc.com, Zoom, VNC, Hamachi, Skype, GoToMeetings, Hangouts, VS Live Share. All these items are tools that you can actually use for remote pairing. Slack, I didn't have it on there. I thought I had it on there. Okay.
You do.
Okay. So yeah, so Screen Hero. Screen Hero is integrated with Slack, and it has 2 mouse pointers. Let me see if I had any more notes on that one. Oh no. So 2 mouse pointers, and you have a one-click switch presenter, but the drawback is that there's actually no video. There are instances, so you can share both desktop and instances. You can share both desktops simultaneously. There's persistent chat, and there's no remote control. Fluebits and Nitrous, I think it's nitrous.io is what it's called for console sharing. Not really familiar with those. I didn't dive too much into it, but you can share consoles or editors. So Skype or Google Hangouts. That's what we used before we found out about VS Live Share. VS Live Share is basically the tool that we were really excited about, where it enables quick collaboration and you don't need to sync or configure your tools, your settings, or your environment. Because, like sharing a keyboard, taking turns to drive for some is not really convenient. And huddling across a single screen, it's common, but it usually means that one developer has to contend with like the preferences of another, right? Which hinders our productivity. This tool, it avoids the awkward seating, right? And it also means that the sharer, well, screen sharing avoids the awkward seating, but it also means that the sharer has a loss of control if you have to give the person your, give them the presenting capabilities, and then it prevents the other person from taking the initiative. So Live Share, it provides a shared editing experience with Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. They currently work with JavaScript, TypeScript, and C#. And it's similar to shared editing. So pretty much each person can see the other's cursor and your text selections. You can make edits, and you can also share debugging. A project can be launched under the debugger, and both people can call the stack, examine the scope, change the values in the windows, and both sides can single step through the debugger to advance through the program. So,
how much is VS Live Code like Cloud 9?
So Cloud 9, you're online. It's like an online editor. This is not online. It's on your actual machine.
Your app, yeah.
Yeah. So there's like a socket connection between the two. So you start that, and then you have an open connection between it, and they're passing debug or information across. And so I'm on my editor with my own configurations, my own settings. But I'm looking at the code that's on his machine, and I can go, if he's on page A, I can go to page B and look at code on there, even though that code's not actually on my machine.
Is it secure?
Yeah.
Secure connection?
Yeah. So the one part of it that I'm not sure how they're going to work out, so I wouldn't say just go and randomly do it just yet, but there has to be a point that makes the connection between the two of you, right? So there's a middleman to make the connection, and then from that point forward, you're connected machine to machine directly over HTTPS.
Have you created, the key pairs? So does each installation have a private and public key?
Yeah, so it's created at that time when you start the share.
Oh,
yeah.
So it's dynamic.
Yeah.
It's kind of like public key infrastructure where you negotiate a shared key.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can just generate that key
So
on
you
the
just,
fly.
if you're on the one, you're just getting access to this particular code. You're not getting machine access.
No. And his preferences are on. So if he decides to use VS Live Share, he's on VS Live Share. I can be on Visual Studio Code, and whatever his configurations are, he can have his configuration set up, and I'll have my own personal configurations. So with that said, I think we're at the end of the slide. So what we talked about today was the overview with the intro, pair programming, the benefits, when to pair, when not to pair, times that we actually already pair, and others who do pair. And then we talked about the pairing techniques, ping pong pairing, Pomodoro, switching roles, and rotating team members, and mob programming. We saved the demo for last. And we talked about the pairing considerations with the team, pairing considerations for the room, source control, and remote pairing. And this is what I used. I used Visual Studio, Pluralsight. I don't remember what that is, and Google. So yeah, this is the end. So you can change the way you work, or you can change the way you work. All right, so we're gonna show a little bit of the pair programming. So this is the FizzBuzz that we had talked about earlier. So let's say with VS Live Share, Andre, you have Live Share up?
Send me a link.
Okay. So for the VS Live Share, I would just hit up, let's say I have a problem right here. Let me start off by saying, before I call Andre for help, I already have the task of setting everything up. I have the for loop going through, and I have the formatter and the FizzBuzz function. There should be nothing there. I'm not sure. Let's find out. Okay, so I just opened here, but I would like, it's simple here, but let's consider this as being it's a big feature that we're going to be putting in. So I need some help. So I need to have couple more eyes on the item. So I would just go through and I would go in Slack, tell Andre, hey, I have a problem. Well, or I would like to implement a new feature, blah, 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 or ... And he would say, okay, yeah, sure. Send me the link. So I would copy the link and I would send it over to him. And it says it's copied on my clipboard. And I think that's it. Okay. So I just sent him. Yeah. So that's the link. Yeah. Wait, say that again?
It goes to that middle guy.
Yeah, the middle.
That's talking about that middle.
All right. So I just sent him this link, and then he just clicks on the link, and then he will be able to.
I'm opening it on my side, which I should probably share my screen at some point too. In VS Code, he's in Visual Studio, so you don't have to be in the same editor. I think there's going to be plugins for other editors later on as well. So you can be using.
Like Adams, can you
share your screen? Share your screen in Hangouts.
Yeah. All right. Hold on a second. Let me share my screen. Oh.
You don't have to. I'll just put this. I'll just put it there.
Okay.
Andre, what's the framework called that they're actually using?
The VS Code. VS Live Share. I'll put it in the show notes. Gosh, I watch too much things. Podcast. Yeah. 1 second. All right. So this is what it looks like on my machine.
So he's actually using VS Live. VS.
Yeah. So if you go back to yours, and I got this highlighted that section of screen there.
Oh.
Yeah, just go back to the studio. And you can see it there. So that's me. Right. And I can actually change that. Like, no, don't do that. That's silly. Whatever.
What, did you type something?
I didn't type anything.
Okay. All right. So yeah. So that would be VS. That would be how VS Live Share would interact.
So another thing that's interesting, like I just moved. I'm not on that page anymore. Like I've gone over to Program CS, and I can expect that, and I can go through it. And I don't have any of this code on my actual machine. It's on his machine. But all the dependencies as well. Let's say he had a Node application, and I don't have Node installed on my machine. I can still run through it on my machine, although I don't have the dependencies on my machine. So let's say he's running in the container and running in Docker, and I didn't have Docker on my machine. I would still be able to step through it because it's not actually executing on my machine. It's still executing on his machine. But I get all the information as I need it passed to me via the socket that's connected to the two machines. So I think Adam has something already similar to this. The difference between this one, Live Share, and Adam is you can't do the live debugging. So if he starts a debugging session in there, I get all his debug information. I can set breakpoints and I can inspect variables as well in that step, in that process.
Okay. So so like we said with FizzBuzz, you're going through you're changing the numbers divisible by 3, change that to Fizz. For Buzz, you change numbers divisible by 5, you change that to Buzz, and then for numbers divisible by 3 and 5, so 15 and 30, you change that to FizzBuzz. So so I have a test already written over here that says, for the first thing, returns 1 given 1. It's supposed to be equal to 1. So the first thing that I did, I wrote a failing test, right? So the next thing that I'm going to be doing here, I'm just going to say, where's the home button? I don't like that thing. This is what I'm used to. This is my configuration. Okay.
Going down, so another test. I like tests.
So yeah, so Andre's over here doing his thing. And,
yeah.
God,
come on. My private space, man. The compiler will catch it. You will be okay.
The mob, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much my program.
I think this classifies as pointing and shit, though.
Is it Fizz?
Give 3, returns Fizz. Yeah. Okay, so Andre is writing that test. I'm not sure if I can run the test.
Oh, my
while
bad.
he's
Yeah,
typing.
you can go ahead. Go ahead and file. Let me stop.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and let's just go ahead and run because I'm sure it's gonna pass. Okay, so that guy gets run and it passed.
All right, so writing test.
Andre is writing his new test. Returns 3 given 3.
Yeah, it's supposed to return buzz, right?
Yeah.
Or fizz. Which one is it?
Fizz for 3. So while he writes that test, this one already passes for 1. So we're gonna step ahead a little bit further.
13.
And
Not 13. All right, undid your typing.
Yeah.
I was doing untyping.
so we're gonna do theory. And then I'm gonna do inline data.
That's all right. Oh, you guys can see. Yeah, you can see.
Inline data. 1 is supposed to return 1. What I'm doing here is it's another, well, up where I can write, I'm writing multiple tests for, well, it's multiple options for one test. Here, and what is the, let's call it number, and then.
So I didn't practice with him, so he has a process he's gonna do.
Okay, so here we have, I'm gonna replace these with expected results. And where we have 1 here, we're gonna put a number. The test is supposed to, well, the test is supposed to fail. I think both, well, he just commented his out.
Yeah. Oh, you want to comment mine? Because then you'll have 2 failing tests.
Well, yeah, let's start off with one. Let's do one at a time. Okay. We're gonna build, and then we're gonna run the test. I thought it was. No, it's just running. So we're gonna go to test. Still run all test. Okay. But there's one that failed. So now we're gonna have to figure out a way how to resolve this issue. So what do you guys think I should do?
Turn eye.
Okay. There you go. Well, we have to make sure that we return it as a 2-string because
it's a string.
All right, there we go. All right, so now we run the test again. Running all tests, and then everything should pass. Okay, so it's kind of similar. We're kind of running through the ping pong pairing. So, you know, we're writing a failing test, and then we switch, and then we write it. We're doing mob programming, punny and shit. We're doing, and we're also doing, so pairing. Well, Pomodoro is going to take us a little bit longer. So now in this case, we're doing fizz. Okay, so let's see what happens there. Well, the test is going to fail. So what we're going to say is if, let's say, in this case, if we're typing and I don't know how to do the mod operator, this is when they use, well, let's say if I is equal to 3, start off with doing that. And I'm going to say return fizz. And that should satisfy your test, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's just run it all. Awesome. Okay, what else you got for me?
I got more for you.
Lay it on me.
Was it 5?
Yeah. Yeah, but okay. Here I would say 5. You run the debugger? Probably not.
Yeah, I can.
It's gonna fail.
Return is still fizz.
There we go. Mob programming at its best. Control R and then A. Okay. So now the test pass.
All right. Let's do another one. Because
Let's keep it in.
9 is equal to fizz. Okay. So now he's trying to be smart, trying to be slick on me. So what I'm gonna say is, if I is, well, if I, in this case, if I didn't, right. So in this case, let's say, for example, I don't know how to use the mod operator. Like, let's say if I would say something like, I don't know, what I dot math dot divisible by, like, if I didn't know how to use the mod operator, if I had somebody else, you know, just out there helping me out, like, hey, maybe you could try this little tool or something like that, then that would probably work.
Yeah, there's probably a JavaScript library for modules.
Yeah.
it's optimized. It works in all browsers. All right.
Okay, so we're good. And while we're doing that, we can probably change to use, you know, make it a little bit cleaner. Okay. And now we're looking at 15. So if we did it this way, and I know.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying they know.
Physicals.
Huh?
Divide by 3, you're gonna get fizz, and then it's gonna divide by 5, gives you buzz, and then it's gonna get to the next step. So it's gonna give you fizz buzz.
No.
It'll just give you fizz?
Yeah, that's what's gonna happen.
Okay. So we could probably put this at first. Okay. You guys are nasty developers. Okay, so let's see if this works. Okay, so that's good. All right, you got any more tests for me?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so I think everything so far, you know, this is basically how it works. So now that we have all the conditions met, there was a podcast that I listened to. It says, somewhere in the podcast, he says, make it work. No, make it work, make it right, make it fast, right? So what we just made it work, right? So let's see if we can make it right. So we see here that we're doing the mod for 3 here twice. We're doing the mod for 5 here twice. So what we could do, we could probably have like some type of function that we could call to make it a little bit easier.
If we had an empty string that would append fizz for the 3% 3 check, and then it would append buzz with 5, then we'd have to do the check for percent 3 again. For mod 3.
Okay. So now we're gonna be doing it. There you go. We're gonna be doing a result. So now, you know, I'm tired.
The string, yeah.
Right. So in this pair programming practice, I'm typed out, right? So now Andre can go ahead and he can take over.
Be more fun being a tap out.
Uncle.
Oh.
I don't know how to do fizz buzz.
You can return the.
Shoot. You can tell I would fill the interview. All right.
Okay.
Well,
Pair programming in your interview.
I'm pushing for pair programming in my interview, but HR is still not buying it just yet. But that's the only way I think you can really see what a developer is actually.
Right.
good.
So, like, you can give
Talking
some
through.
arbitrary ass test, but like to actually sit down and work with
Yeah,
somebody.
I want to know if he closed the keyboard after he's frustrated for 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
It might be a red flag type of thing. All right. I think
Okay.
actually. All right. What did you do, Leighton?
So here we have.
Because we're screwed up.
So if the
Because
fizz.
if we do this, then we lose the numbers.
So we can do the string. We can set it from from line 14.
Oh, we can't do that because then we'll end up with.
Why don't you just do like a concat to the result?
No, hold on. Before we do that, what we could do is say if the result.
Found.
Oh, if string is null or empty, right?
Oh yeah, I like that.
For result. Look at us.
Yeah.
Look at us doing big things.
You know,
Then we would just set the result there.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, you can do that. And then return result. And then we can take this bad boy out.
Look at that. I need a pen.
Okay. Now we're looking good.
Now we just need a little.
Well, just make sure that the test pass because.
And I gotta get rid of this white space because that's in my configuration that bothers me.
OCD.
Only white spaces.
Hey man, I feel the same way. Yeah. That like you hit enter after an indented code. It leaves that couple of spaces there, and you get down a little line. It doesn't take them out. Like,
and later on, when you do a pull request, you're gonna see a diff. The only thing that's gonna be a diff is white space.
Freedom white spaces.
Like what?
I mean, you can set up whatever to ignore that.
What if you just moved it? You don't have it in there. I mean, we haven't gotten it yet. Just remove it.
Do that kind of
yeah. Yeah. I think
there's
there's
a sense or something.
There's a JS.
It's like prettier.
Prettier. That's what I'm thinking about.
Oh.
Prettier will actually configure it for you. When you hit save, it'll just it removes the
white space
formatting discussions. You decide on a format.
Oh, okay.
Prettier just enforces
it.
Every time you save it, just like, yep, I'll fix that for you. Put it in the right format.
So now we have, so now we have all our tests passing. Everything is good. It is shipping. So let's say we could probably make it a little bit. We could switch it up a little bit, but I think this for right now is a good place for us to, we all get an example of what pair programming is and how we can implement it. So
another thing I like about this because
more documentation would be good.
Yeah.
Another thing I like about this is I tend to go down the what if rabbit hole. Oh, I gotta make it distributable to 100 machines and blah blah blah. And then like, as that satisfy the requirements, yes, ship it. We're done.
Yeah. Always
so you can have like that second person there as a voice of reason.
Yeah, they'd be like, yep, I think we've met this requirement.
Right.
I think we're done.
That's like totally my weakness. Is like, oh, what about?
Yeah. Add some containers and then throw on some.
Okay.
Just
all right.
Because.
So yeah. So that is it. That is pair programming.
Yeah. Cool. Well done. Thank you, sir.
I don't know how to get out of this thing now.
Slow clap.
Slow clap. Golf clap. Golf clap for you, sir.
All right. I think we'll sign off. Any questions or anything before? Do that. All right. Were you guys not amazed at the live share thing? Because I was freaking amazed.
That's really cool. I think
I was like,
yeah, it was awesome.